In this video, we're going to take a look at how I paint my custom Space Marine chapter, the Shield Bearers of Baal. So to begin the black armor, we're going to take dark sea blue, and this is going to be an edge highlight over all of the armor. Now, in terms of GW, the dark sea blue is something akin to Incubi Darkness. So when we're doing our edge highlights, we want to make sure that our paint is thinned down to roughly the consistency that you see here. So it's not too thin, it's not like a wash or a glaze or anything like that, but it's also not really thick. It's more of a layer paint consistency. And then when we're ready, we just load up our brush, but be sure to wick off some of it, because having it straight from the palette will be too much paint and it will flood the detail. So on our model, we are simply looking for all of the sharpest edges, so areas such as here, along the side of the leg here, and any of these sharp edges along things like the hands and the arms as well. So it's just a matter of going around, just picking out all these edges, keeping it nice and neat. Now, this will obviously take a while, but it'll be worth it. Okay, and this is the model after those first round of edge highlights. So you can see the blue is really quite subtle, but it will help to enhance the later edge highlights. So moving on, we're going to do another edge highlight, but this time with rust grey. So same as before, we've thinned this down on our palette and we've wicked off a good chunk of it. And this is going to be a bit more of a fine edge highlight. So we're not going to do all of the previous area. See here how I'm going to stop about halfway, leaving this bit that darker blue. But it's just a matter of going around and repeating the process, edge highlighting these areas, but just ensure that you highlight a smaller area. Okay, and after that stage, this is how the edge highlights are looking. Now, honestly, you could just leave it here, but if you want to take it a step further, we are going to use Fenrisian Grey, and that's just going to be an extra fine highlight. So with your Fenrisian Grey, basically the steps that we just did, we're going to do even less. So here, for instance, we're just going to do a very small dot right in the center, and I have gone down to a size 00 now. Same with along here, it's just a very small dot just on the sharpest edges. And here we are. So with that final edge highlight complete, the black armor is finished. So moving on, we're going to do all of the red details that are parts like on the shield, the plume on the hair here, and the shoulder pads, and also the cape that you see just here. So to base coat the red, we are simply just using Mephiston Red. And we've thinned this down, and it's just a matter of 2 thin coats over all of these red details. Okay, and here we go. So this is the red details blocked in. So the next step is to use a purple wash, and that's going to be specifically for things like the tabard here, and we'll do a panel line on the shoulder pads. So when doing your all over wash on the tabard, we are just going to make sure that it doesn't pool anywhere. But if you do see any pooling, it's okay, just clean off your brush, dry it off, and you can wick up any of the excess wash. When it comes to the shoulder pad and a pin wash, just take your time and just run the wash only into these recess areas here. Alright, With that purple applied, you see how it just gives a lot of depth to the red. So our next step is going to be all of the gold details, because that includes things like the Spartan lavender just here, the chest eagle, and these shoulder pads. So the reason we're going to do the gold now is because if we get any of the gold onto the red, it's okay, it's just a Mephiston red and it's easy to fix. So to do the gold that I use in my scheme, I prefer more of a cold gold kind of approach. So to me, base Retributory Drama is just a bit too warm. So I mix it in with Grey Knight Steel in roughly a sort of 50-50, if not maybe about 4-to-1 kind of mix. So, and you see here, so we'll take some of this Retributory Drama and we'll mix in some of the Grey Knight Steel. And that just there is the kind of colour we're looking for. So when you're happy with the colour, it's just a matter of loading up your brush and just painting this onto all of the areas that need to be gold. And as always, applying 2 thin coats rather than 1 thick coat is ideal here. With that gold applied, we're now just going to cover it with a Nuln Oil wash. When applying this, just be careful not to completely flood the area. If you do, you can just dry off your brush and you can wick up any of that excess Nuln Oil wash. Once our shade is dry, we are going to highlight the gold with pure Grey Knight Steel. Using the Grey Knight Steel here rather than a gold allows us to maintain that cold gold approach, and we're just going to run this as an edge highlight along all of the sharpest edges. With those highlights complete, the gold is now finished. So we'll move on to highlight the red. So first things first, on the red, we are just going to return to our Mephiston red, and we're going to paint this on all of the raised areas of the red, leaving that purple wash we did earlier in the recesses. When it comes to painting the crest on the helmet here, I'm going to be painting this Mephiston red from about 3/4 of the way up, leaving this very lower area dark with that wash. With that Mephiston red established, we're then going to come in with Evil Sun Scarlet. This is going to be a finer highlight, so instead of doing, say, this whole area here, we're going to start about 3/4 of the way up and do more of this over this right hand side area rather than doing the whole thing. And then we can also start using this as more of a edge highlight along some of these sharp areas here. And then if we think about the miniature, this shield will cast a shadow over this area, so we're actually only going to highlight this left hand side here. When it comes to the plume, we're going to go about another 1/4 way up, so starting about here, and we're going to do just these upper areas. And and that way it builds a transition from the dark reddish purple to the Mephiston to the Evil Suns. When it comes to the shoulder pad, now there's quite a few different techniques we can use to blend the shoulder pad, because I want it to be brighter here at the top with a transition up to that bright point. The technique I'm going to use is called feathering. So what we're going to do, we're going to load up our brush, we're going to paint our brighter tone, so this is that Evil Sun Scarlet still. I'm going to paint that up here on the brightest point. Now this is fairly thin down, it's a thin layer consistency basically. And then we're going to wash off our brush, dry it off, and then what we do is we come in and we grab some of this paint from the lower half and we just pull it down into that Mephiston red that we did earlier. Okay, and there we go. So I did about 3 coats in the end, and you can see how it just has this nice, very quite subtle transition from the darker red into the brighter red. Continuing with the highlights, we now have Wild Rider Red, and we're going to repeat the same process, but this time on an even smaller scale. So in this case, just this lower half here, and on the edge highlights. And on some of the sharper bits up here. And then on the plume, this is going to be more of a very, very fine highlight just at the very top. After that Wild Rider red, you could leave the red like that, but I'm going to do a very fine highlight of Troll Slayer orange, and this is going to be on those sharpest areas, such as along here. The edge highlight along here. And an edge highlight along the very top of the plume. And with those final edge highlights done, the red is now finished. So our next step is going to be all of the leather details. So that's going to be the gun holster here and the sword scabbard just here. So to begin, we're just going to base coat the whole area with Rhinox hide. Okay, alongside that Rhinox hide, I also base coated in some of these metal details. So we've got the lead belcher just here, same with on the scabbard here, and then I also did Rhinox hide on the belt along with the metal for the belt buckle. So next up on the leather, we've gone to Scrag Brown by Games Workshop, and we've gone down to a size 0 brush here, and this is going to be an edge highlight. So just run the side of your brush along all of these sharp details. It doesn't matter if your edge highlights are quite thick like they are here, because we're going to do some weathering as well. Once we've done those edge highlights, we're going to come in with the same Scrag Brown, this time with an even smaller brush. This is a size 00, and we're going to do kind of like dots and scratches. So we're going to come to this edge here, and we're going to do very small dots and scratches just to give the impression of like not a clean edge. This just starts to give a worn leather kind of approach. And then equally with the same colour, we're going to do very light scratches on the actual body of the holsters. and we can do some dots as well. And with those dots and scratches complete, you can honestly call the leather done here, but I'm going to do one extra step, which is to use Ushabti bone and repeat the process. So with the Ushabti bone, we're just looking to do just a couple of these little dots and scratches this time compared to the previous step. It's just to sort of highlight extra worn areas basically. And with that Ushabti bone step done, your aged leather is finished. So next up, we're just going to use Agrax Earthshade on all of those metallics. So with those leather details done, we're now going to move on to do the eyes. And then after that, we've only got the sword and the purity seals left, and then we are finished. So the eyes on my miniatures are green. So here we have got Warpstone Glow, and we're just going to base coat the entire eye with this. With the base coat established, we're going to take Moot Green. I'm going to dot the very end of the eye. For the purity seals, we're going to base coat the actual parchment in Xandri Dust. Probably looking for a sort of 2 thin coats here. Now be careful when you get around near that black. If you do get any on the black, just return to your base colour, in our case Abaddon Black, and just tidy up. For the wax, I'm going to base coat it in this gory red, but a GW alternative would be corn red. Whilst we have this gory red out, we're going to base coat the handle of the sword in this colour as well. For the wax, we're going to shade it in Truki Violet, and for the parchment, we're going to shade it in Agrax Earthshade. If you get a large pooling like I did here, it's okay, just wick off your brush and you can come back in and soak that up, just like that. We're also using the Truki Violet here on the sword hilt as well. With the Agrax Earthshade dry, we're going to take Ushabti Bone, and we're just going to highlight the parchment, leaving some of the Agrax and Xandri dust showing in the recesses. For the wax, we're just going to take Mephiston Red, and we're just going to very lightly highlight some of these raised areas. And last but not least, for the purity seals, we're going to take some black and we're going to do small wiggly lines to simulate the writing. And there we go, the purity seals are now finished. So for the final step, we're going to take some lead belcher and we're going to base coat the sword. This will likely require 2 thin coats as well. To highlight the lead belcher, I'm going to use Vallejo Metal Colour Silver, but in terms of a GW colour, this would be something like Stormhost Silver. So with this silver, it's just going to be a case of a very simple edge highlight across the blade, but then equally we're going to do small little dots and small little scratches just randomly along the blade, just to give it a little bit more texture. And now, of course, you could by all means just leave the sword there, and that's absolutely fine, but we're going to do a very small glow effect from this power node here. So to do our glow effect, we're going to take Calidor Sky, and we're going to take a dry brush, just wipe off most of this on a tissue, work it into all of the bristles until you're left with something like that, where not much of it's really coming off. And then onto our model, we are simply going to very lightly dry brush this around that area and including the power node itself. Now this probably will take some time, but you know, just be careful with it. Don't completely overdo it, and just build up the effect. Our next step is to take Lothern Blue. I've also gone down to a much smaller dry brush here, much more precise. And same again, wipe off most of it. And then just paint this more centrally towards the actual orb itself. But still try to get some of that over onto the blade. Okay, and this is how it's looking. So our next step is to take some of that same Lothern Blue, but with our actual normal paintbrush now, and just paint in the actual orb just to really reinforce it. And last but not least, our final step is to take a very small amount of white and just dot the very end of the power node, just like that. And that's it. We are finished. Other than basing, obviously you can base your army however you like, but this is how I paint my custom chapter, the Shield Bearers of Baal. Thank you all so much for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll be back for more.